Hey everyone, I'm so excited to dive into my new favorite book out with one of my favorite people to follow that makes me always smile and happy is Mr. Shawn Wells. Hello, with a smile on his face.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here on this call with you. You're one of my favorite human beings as well. And yeah, let's talk about the energy formula.
Well, I was messaging you. I printed them out. I need glasses to read now,
I
but
saw it.
I usually write down 3 questions. I haven't even finished your book. And it's just exactly the message I'm trying to get out to people. So you're the perfect person to come on the podcast to talk about what is the energy formula and just talk about all the things that I love learning about and sharing with people that chronic stress impacts the whole person from the inside out, as well as, not living life as a race, and that we can't out supplement poor lifestyle behaviors. So we need to work on the whole person to really be healthy. And what you said so much stuff in your book in the beginning, especially that really spoke to me. And I know everyone's had their struggles the past year and probably a lot of learning lessons. And so you wrote this book and then you kind of rewrote it last year. What was a change for you that made you kind of go back and redo some things?
That's a great question. And it was really me getting into my plant medicine journeys. COVID was a big part of that, where I was supposed to be traveling 300 days last year, because
Crazy.
I was going to be speaking on stage. I was going to be traveling to Brazil and China for business. I literally will be gone for months at a time. And I'm in masterminds and all kinds of things where I'm literally just traveling all around the year. And I wasn't making a whole lot of time for myself. And I was stuck still, even though I'm this great biohacker, supplement guy, all these things, keto. I was still like in achievement mode as like the wounded entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Where to explain that, like I believe that if I got to a certain level of achievement in happiness, in success, in sexiness, and whatever, like that's where I needed to be to love myself. Because people would love me, then I'd love myself.
Yeah.
Not realizing that I can start with self-love, not realizing that sexy, happy, successful are states of being, not an achievement,
Mm-hmm.
but I can just have that now. And like when I got into the plant medicine space and did my first journey, and I felt love for myself and I felt a deep love for others, like in a different way because of my own self-love, I could project out love on a deeper level, because that's what we do. We project ourselves. They say hurt people, but loving people love people, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had those experiences that I had a massive shift. Like I was in a cuddle puddle on the floor, with all these amazing people. And I hadn't told them my resume. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know I was like accomplished and a formulator and, business guy and a world traveler. And I've been on TV and all. Like it was just, he's the guy in the cuddle puddle. And they're like, hey, you're a great person. Thank you. Like, and it's just like, wow, like, it's that simple. And like there was so many shifts in my heart, and then I did repeated journeys. I started working with a Byron Katie style therapist. I started doing more mentorship and masterminds and really exploring myself and reading more self-help books, and just recognizing that biohacking up until that point was a means for me to survive. And I
Mm-hmm.
got really good at it because I was working 80 hours a week. I had self-loathing. I had disordered eating at many points in my life. I had body dysmorphia. Went from morbidly obese to emaciated and anorexic to orthorexic, and I've done all the things. And it's like finally, like yes, I've been an expert at biohacking for 20 years, but finally I love myself, and like now that's being, all the biohacks are now optimizations on that solid foundation finally. And so I kept like taking the book from like the pure science to really incorporating in my stories to like, growth in your tribe, especially like towards the end, it like gets into more mindset, a little bit more woo, if you will, and like just has like the common thread to the entire book is resilience. And with greater resilience, you have more energy for life.
Yeah.
I needed energy because I was so depleted all the time. And I got really good at ways to find energy. But this is a way to like live vibrantly. And that was an evolving thing for me that really changed over the last year and a half. So I even recorded the book, which was very expensive and time consuming. And if you've ever like recorded your own book, it's very difficult. Like 95% of people don't record their own books. I did that and I re-recorded it
Wow.
because I wanted it to be different even at the last second. Because when I read it, that was after a few rewrites of the book and my evolution. I was like, it's a B plus. It's really good. I mean, this is me being hard on me, but like I wanted it to be my story, to be my opus. And so I went back to work and retooled it further, like with more journeys, more experiences. Now I feel like it's an A plus. And I'm very excited for it to be out there and impact lives like it has mine. All these things have impacted mine. So yeah.
I think that's just, so good to be to yourself, show yourself and be authentic. And I think so many people I find, especially everyone's so on social media, that they're not authentic all the time. And to really learn about yourself and redefine what it means to be healthy, and how this past year is about getting healthy, but what it means to you and what you had to do for yourself to get to that next phase and start that new transformational journey is not just being a biohacker with a lot of supplements, but is what we've talked a lot about, is that self-care, is self-love, and being a health optimizer. It's just not doing your exercise, your intermittent fasting, let's do keto, carnivore, whatever it might be that works for you, but figuring out what I call the holistic method, that it's the gratitude, the happiness, and play is an element we often forget. And I was just writing a blog this morning, starting to work on, I didn't know I wasn't happy until this past year with COVID. So I think there's so many things that we could really take, from the past year that are positives, and really
Yeah.
learn like, oh my gosh, I had a year to focus on me and finally
Yeah.
stop and focus like, am I doing what I want to do?
Yeah.
Am I happy? Am I thriving? How's my vitality?
Exactly. And that's what COVID was for me. For me, it was a massive blessing. I realized that there's been lives that have been negatively impacted in terms of the health crisis,
Yeah.
and also, depression, suicidal thoughts, and people economically in hard places. I get that it's not been an easy time, but for me personally, having that time to take a step back, to have the world be unplugged for a minute in a way that I would have never been able to do that, barring me having a heart attack or cancer or something like that. That's when I would have been able to stop everything. But for everything to stop, like when I was like on my grind and, hustling and all that stuff, quote unquote, I mean, that just doesn't happen. And the pandemic made it happen. And it allowed me to take those steps back to evaluate like what it is that lights me up, what it is that doesn't, to talk to some great people and really invest in some amazing relationships, to do these journeys like on certain weekends with great facilitators and set intentions and do great integration work
Mm-hmm.
and work with therapists and like come through the other side like way more bulletproof, like
Yeah.
I'm way more resilient now because of my mindset, because of the way I talk to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if anyone talked to you like you talk to you, you wouldn't be their friend. So
That's so
I,
true, right? Yeah,
I
that mean
switched,
person.
yeah, I switched from that inner critic to the inner champion. Like I actually do gratitude and affirmations before I get out of bed along with breath work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a game changer for me as well. So like some of the things that I talk about in the book, I'm doing every day and have
Mm-hmm.
changed my life.
Yeah, it's good. You have to practice what we preach instead of just saying all this stuff and having all these challenges out there and doing it, but do you walk the talk
Yep.
and really do it yourself? So let's talk about the 6 life-changing ingredients. What are the words energy mean to you, and how they can really help us be our best version of ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah. So energy formula, the energy formula, energy is an acronym for experiment, and that covers like biohacking, epigenetics, bioindividuality, how to do the testing, how to understand that you are different from someone else, and how to make these things work for you. and what that process looks like, how to get a functional medicine doctor, all that stuff. Then the next chapter is nutrition, the N in the energy formula, and it's paleo, keto, vegan, carnivore, going through all of those things, what those look like for you. Do they make sense for you? How to execute on them? What, like, for example, metabolic flexibility is, or, cyclical or targeted ketogenic dieting. With paleo, there's AIP, the autoimmune protocol.
Mhm.
There's just a lot of discussions that go on there. Like, what is the common thread with a well executed vegan or carnivore diet? It's whole food, and I get into that in there, and so a lot of great stuff there. And then exercise is the E. The next E, get into high intensity interval training versus low intensity steady state cardio. Why HIIT can be so much better in terms of body composition and adaptation. And even some cool exercise hacks like intraset stretching, blood flow restriction, that
Mhm.
can get you results a lot faster. Then I get into routines. This is like probably one of my favorites. It gets into circadian rhythm, the sleep wake cycle, the day night cycle with your body, what that looks like with a proper morning routine, like I was just kind of talking about. Those were some elements of it.
Mhm.
And then what sleep hygiene looks like and setting up a sleep fortress, and like when to eat during the day according to circadian rhythm. And what about blue light, and what does that look like? You want to block it in the evenings and get plenty in the mornings. And so all the things that we know how to do to set our circadian rhythm. And then growth, which is like growth mindset, like stoicism, the obstacle's the
Mhm.
way, but also getting into nootropics. And then I get into intermittent and extended fasting. And then lastly is your tribe, which is about that community, that connection. That's, I mean, more important now than ever. I think we've
Yeah.
all realized, and how these people in blue zones are living the longest for those reasons. So that is the energy formula, quickly summarized.
Yeah, no, that's like all of the topics. And I love that because it's kind of what I love to coach people on. And I'm not, I used to always coach athletes, triathlon training schedules. And I'm now just like, sorry, I'm only doing this holistic method coaching that I have to cover all of that, kind of what you talked about, your sleep and the stress. And because you can't, as we said in the beginning, you can't out exercise a bad diet and you can't out supplement poor lifestyle habits. And so really to optimize performance in life and work on longevity it isn't just for athletes listening. It's not just exercising more or doing keto, carnivore, whatever you're into, is working on this whole energy formula. So I love what you're talking about in there. So let's kind of go over what resiliency is if people aren't quite sure of some words. Like, what is your definition of it?
Resilience is, I think of like, it's like elasticity, right? Like, I think of that rubber band as resilient on a technical level. And it means that you're harder to kill, that you can withstand physiologic and mental stress better. And what that means in the body is that there's a bucket, if you can imagine a stress bucket, called
Mhm.
allostatic load.
Mhm.
And the more resilient you are, the bigger that stress bucket is, and the more we can deal with the stressors that are filling up that bucket. And so when we have a very small bucket, it can overflow very easily. We can go from, doing fine to like feeling like we're having a breakdown. We can go from feeling fine to just wanting to go straight to bed because the bucket is so small. And what's happening right now when we're, in a situation where we're highly sterilized and we're not getting the microbiome, when we're not getting hugs and we're isolated, when we're exposed to fear all the time with all these different, things going on in politics and mask, no mask, Biden, Trump, like all the things that are going on right now that are creating fear and dividing people. Anything that, I'll just say this as an aside right now. I don't try and get political or religious, but there's only two, like, this one thing really bothers me. If someone's trying to put you in one box or the other, just be mindful of that, like be very weary of that, because that's a tactic to not only control you, but make you dislike the other box.
Mhm. But
And
they make sides, so you create enemies
they make
almost like
sides. They make sides, so you create enemies, so you get agitated, so that you have clickbait, so that you buy more, so that you follow more, so that you watch more. And none of that's true. We're 99.9% the same. We all want to be happy, to get some sunshine, like live a decent life, meet someone that we love, and live out our days in relative happiness. I mean, that's
yeah.
just like, that's everyone. Like the other stuff is like small points. And I think if we were to all get together in the same room, we'd all feel like we have all those things in common again. Like I'm saying, like, there's just small differences that they're trying to like leverage to divide us. And it's silly. Like this
Mhm.
stuff is just frustrating that we're getting divided so much, and it's creating a lowered immune system. It's lowering our resilience. It's making us easier to kill. Beyond that, we're thermically controlled, which is another thing. Like all day long, we're 68 to 72 degrees. You know, we don't have extreme temperatures anymore like we used to. So we're less resilient. And then we're eating all day long, and we're less resilient as a result, like because we're not used to going long periods of time without eating. You know, it's called fasting now. It used to be called starving, but it's the same idea that we would go some period of time without eating. And that caloric restriction, that fasting or starving, increases our sirtuin gene activity. It activates those genes that are associated with longevity, that are associated with
Mhm.
resilience. And so like we're becoming easier to kill because we're eating all day long, because we're we're not getting the proper sleep, we're not doing a good morning routine, we're not dealing with our stress, we're getting isolated, we're getting trapped into dopamine distractions with cell phones,
Yeah.
and not having quality relationships or getting any quality work done. We're not even
Mhm.
productive anymore. We're just constantly distracted and fearful.
Yeah.
And so all of these things are adding up to just a degree of a lack of resilience, of a very small stress bucket. We're getting easier to kill, so to speak. So, what you want to do is all the things that I talk about in the book. Get the quality friendships. You know, get the 5 people around you that are really building you up in a variety of ways, like great mentors. You want to have that growth mindset, that stoic mindset, where the obstacle is the way. You know, you want to eat a great diet. You do want to get to bed on time every night, sleep hygiene. You want to have a proper sleep fortress where
Mhm.
it's the right things in the room that make you think sleep, that make you feel relaxed. It's called anchoring, psychosomatic anchoring. So you don't want things in there in your bedroom that trigger you, or, you know, that make you think work, or make you think arguments, or make you think anything but sleep and relaxation. And all of these things, you know, are going to help with your resilience, like getting like the cold plunges and the hot saunas and the red light therapy. And these are all things that are making you more resilient, making you harder to kill. That's the through line in the book. And I think it's more timely now than ever.
For sure. I mean, that's why I feel like, I want to keep sharing this information with everyone because it's the time of all of our lives that we should be working on this past year. And I just been trying to get that message across. But the difference of acute stress versus chronic stress is what I have always talked about. And you just
Yeah.
explain it. It's just that, little dose. I always used to think of it as a leaky faucet, just drip, or you turn it on, turn it off, turn off. But what happens, we just have this constant ongoing stressors that we don't know how to shut it down, and we kind of get that imbalance in all our body systems, and we're kind of living in that fight or flight or freeze, and we don't know how to go back and forth. So that's kind of what you're talking about, the stress in the body. The hormesis is what we
Yeah.
always talk about in kind of the biohacking world, is what we're trying to get that resiliency built up by having those acute doses, right? Just like on off, recover, repair, stress, recover, repair.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's it exactly that. Yeah, you want to be in periods, like largely you want to be in states of ease. Otherwise, you're in states of disease.
Disease, yeah.
You literally get disease. You want to be in states of ease with occasional periods of uncomfortability. And that's what you're talking about. And that uncomfortability at times is going to be those hormetic stressors that help you adapt and grow and get stronger. But a lot of times we're in chronic stress, not because of that we don't have food, we don't have the ability to sleep, that we're in a traumatic situation, that we're, that we, are dealing with extreme temperatures and exposure. It's mostly like our own doing, and largely because of the cell phone and the
Yeah.
distractions that we have, and that we do get looped in and manipulated and programmed by our cell phones, by our TVs, by all these things that are profiting from our manipulation, and we're staying in a state of distraction. And it's making us stay in that sympathetic nervous system all day long.
Yeah.
People will say that they're so busy that they don't have time to X, to go to the gym, to, spend time with a friend, to call that friend, to write a letter. I mean, people used to write letters, they used to do all these things, right? But we're so busy. But wait, we have a lot more things done for us. We have like food delivered to us. We have convenience stores and vending machines, and we have cars that go faster and faster roads. And there's some people that work from home. Like there's like infinitely more conveniences, but somehow we're way more busy. Have you ever
Mhm.
thought about that? Why that is?
I've been writing about that every day this past week. Is
Like,
like we're addiction to
people.
busyness.
Yeah, and busy doesn't equal productive. Busy
Yes.
just means you're busy, and you're staying in that sympathetic nervous system state, and you're kind of frantic all day long. And we're in that constant state of distraction, looking at our cell phone, looking back at the computer, then getting a phone call, looking at the computer, looking at the cell phone, looking at the guy who just walked in the office, looking at this, looking at that, distracted, distracted, distracted. You're not a multitasker. No one's a multitasker. It's
Mhm.
called task switching, and it takes you 2 to 5 minutes to actually readjust and get back to being productive. And so if you're constantly doing this, you're never productive.
Mhm.
And then that becomes almost an addiction, or at least a fear that, like actually being focused, like might lead to some kind of disturbance in you, or like uncomfortability in you. And like you actually like fear being productive. Like you're going to just keep putting things off, and like, watching TV and not knowing why you're just laying there. And it becomes like this crazy state like of distractedness. So getting
Mhm.
away from that is obviously ideal. Finding ways to be more productive. It's called like batching is
Mhm.
one term for it, but like Cal Newport calls it deep work. There's also the Pomodoro technique that's talked about, but basically with deep work, Cal Newport talks about like a 2 hour block first thing in the morning when you're most creative, when it's most important, before you go down the rabbit hole of email and all that. Knock out one big task, let's say from 8 to 10 a.m. Then no matter what happens the rest of the day, you've knocked out something huge. You've been productive. You weren't looking at a cell phone. Sometimes people even put their laptop, if that's what they're working on airplane mode,
Mhm.
so that they can just crank and create and get focus. Pomodoro technique is something similar, but you're kind of essentially like have like smaller chunks of being focused and productive. And then you can go back to like standing up or looking at your cell phone or whatever. And then you go back into being productive, like whatever works for you. But like it's an idea that's important, that we're just too distracted, and we're calling ourselves busy, but we're getting nothing done, and we're in a perpetual state of frantic distraction, and it's really unhealthy. Not only is it not productive, it's really unhealthy. Where, like you said, we're
The
in this
brain.
constant sympathetic nervous system state. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I was looking that up the other day because I was trying to write a little blog of the opposite of multitasking. It's like
Mhm.
one thing and what it does to your brain. And there's a lot of good research articles that have been done on the impacts and neuroplasticity, and really
Yeah.
learning how to just do one thing at a time, not have squirrel, constant
Yeah.
distractions. It's constantly hard though, because I'll be working and I'll have like, oh, I remember to do this. And I open that window up and suddenly I have 20 different browsers open. But I've really had to learn to turn off my phone, or don't even have it on, or turn off your email when you're trying to work. Or I go upstairs to our hilltop to work outside where the Wi-Fi is not good. So then I can actually do writing and just focus on, one thing I'm trying to do. But it's
Yeah.
always a challenge. But so I know a lot of our listeners are, endurance athletes, exercising a lot, and probably wondering why I'm talking about this. But I think it's important because what I try to do for coaching clients is people that are struggling to get health results, to burn fat, to become fat adapted, even though they're changing their exercise, they're doing training for endurance events, triathlon, cycling, running, and they're changing what they're eating, but they're still struggling to get healthy, to burn fat, because I think a lot of it is because of that chronic stress externally, but we're creating that metabolic chaos internally with all these hidden internal stressors from that living life as a race and those constant stress mode we're in, and we don't know how to shift out of it. So that's kind of why I wanted to dive into that, because it does relate to the competitive type AAA ambitious high performing individual.
Yeah.
So question next is how do all of that impact our mitochondria? Because we want to burn fat, we want to improve performance and hopefully longevity, but I love to focus on the mitochondria, and I love you're saying that's kind of the hopefully the next new thing, but I've been really thinking, okay, it's not really adrenal exhaustion or fatigue, it's look at the mitochondria because they're our energy powerhouses. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, when you're in those states of like, so most of your athletes, well, I'll put it this way, know overtraining,
Mhm.
which is also known as under recovery. It's the same idea. And
Yep.
sometimes it helps to think about it not as overtraining, but as under recovering.
Mhm.
Um, but that's the same with the body. And when you're in these, or it's the same as a mom that's working 80 hours a week and cooking and overwhelmed and whatever. It's your body just knows stress,
Yeah.
right? And so whether it's stress from working out or stress from your job or stress from fasting or stress from this or that, like it's just stress. And if you have a big enough bucket, you can deal with it. If you don't, it's going to overflow and it's going to put your body into dysfunction. And when it's overflowing, that's you're staying too long in that sympathetic nervous system state. We should have the balance. We should be not only in, like you said, fight, flight, or freeze of the sympathetic nervous system, of the autonomic nervous system, but also the other side is like the parasympathetic, the rest and digest and recover
Mhm.
kind of part of it. And so some people are just staying like pushing too hard. They're training, but and they may think this is the right amount of training, but what if they are dealing with other stresses in their life? They're getting divorced, they just lost their job, they, whatever, like that puts you into like sympathetic and ultra sympathetic. You're on like a vigilant state. Your body's like working too hard to keep you going. You're not allowing your body to rest and recover. You're not allowing yourself to get into those parasympathetic states where things like autophagy happen and all these elements of detoxing and recovery and repair. And so all of that, like your body to try and keep up at this high energy pace and you not allowing it to rest and relax, it's going to result in mitochondrial dysfunction because the mitochondria are just working too hard. You're like literally, it's like you having your car and you keeping the gas pressed down 24/7 when you're driving it. It's like some point your car is going to break down. It's too much. You're asking too much of it. You're braking too hard. You're hitting the gas too hard. You're just pushing, 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 pushing. And so that's going to lead to the mitochondria being overworked and some of them literally just stopping to work altogether. So you don't have enough mitochondria, and the ones that are working too hard. And that's kind of a downward spiral. You can see how that kind of keeps going. It keeps getting worse. And that leads to oxidation, inflammation, and glycation chronically. Blood sugar damages glycation. And those all lead to pro aging and you aging faster biologically than chronologically. And those all lead to more disease states like cancer, like Alzheimer's, like Parkinson's, like coronary heart disease, PCOS. All these things are like metabolic diseases that are correlated to mitochondrial dysfunction. So when we do things that increase our resilience, when we increase the size of our allostatic load, our stress bucket, when we allow ourselves to rest and digest and get into parasympathetic states and states of ease, to be in that flow state, which I think of with ease, but have occasional periods of discomfort, that hormetic stress to grow the stress bucket, and then we can be resilient. But otherwise, like we're in a state of overtraining, whatever that means to you, even if you're
Mhm.
not athletic,
Yeah.
it's kind of overtraining and under recovering. It's
Mhm.
very simple.
And that's what I always say. And when I wrote my book, Life's Not a Race, that take out doing Ironmans, just fill in the blank. It's doing too much of anything is eventually going to cause breakdown and burnout at a cellular level. And that's what I came down to my own processes is that since 2013, March is, it took me 8 years, COVID, to slow down finally. It's like I didn't know how to slow down because I was writing the other day that I feel lazy and unproductive if I'm not doing something. But then, as you're saying, is a lot of times we're not actually productive. We're just making stuff to do and keeping busy without doing actually anything. So it's that constant busyness. If you're exercising too much, but then the rest of the day you've got, like, I owned my own fitness studio for 10 years, luckily closed it in 2018 finally, but it's that constant stress of finances. And if you're running your business or working for someone, it's just, how we respond to that stress is part of it, but and how to deal with it better. But it just all accumulates into that beaker of stress and overfills it. But how can we manage it differently? Or, how can we improve the function of our mitochondria if we are working out and, we have to change our lifestyle behaviors, but what else can we do to reverse that damage almost that we've done to ourselves?
Yeah, so going back to high intensity interval training, that will help with mitochondrial biogenesis, as does things like fasting, as does keto, and a number of things I discussed in the book. But
Mm.
specifically, if you wanted to get into supplements, there's some things that will support mitochondrial health there. You've probably heard of things like PQQ and CoQ10,
Yep.
which support the mitochondria and electron transport chain. CoQ10 in that you reduced form, ubiquinol. All this stuff is in my book if I go fast, and it's only 99 cents. Has 400 pages, over 100 scientific citations, 60 full color diagrams. The book's actually full color front to back. So if you buy the hardcover, it's $39.99, but it cost me $39.80 to make. Literally
Yeah.
full color front to back.
And a lot of good images, by the way. I love the graphics.
Yeah, there's surveys in there to assess your performance. There's chapter summaries with bullet points. There's resource hacks that go through all the tips, techniques, the devices that are summarized. There's formulators corners that have all the supplements, the brands, the doses. So like you can literally just open this book anywhere and just get stuff you want, and
Mhm.
it's not overwhelming at all. That said, moving on into supplements, and you go to energyformula.com and you get all that stuff. And you also get like a fasting for energy guide and a hidden chapter on natural movement. All that stuff's free. So, also beyond that, NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. I feel like that's much better than NR, nicotinamide riboside, also called True Niagen.
Mhm.
Dr. David Sinclair, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, Dr. Peter Attia, I think would agree with me. The NMN is probably the best way to boost NAD levels orally. IV NAD is amazing if you can afford it, and if you want 3 to 6 hours of kind of feeling nauseous,
No.
uh, it can certainly help you, but it's not an enjoyable process. And then beyond that, I love some of the polyphenols. These are really
Mhm.
interesting. Something I get into heavily in the book. Um, there's some polyphenols that increase NAD levels, and as we age, NAD goes way down. So this is really important for mitochondrial health and cellular energy, and they're important for activating those sirtuin genes. They're literally like a component of that. So NAD is like one of the top ways we can have more cellular energy and slow aging. And as we age, NAD declines pretty rapidly, and NAD gets catabolized faster. So we're not making as much, and we're breaking it down faster. And so there's some polyphenols that help boost NAD levels that would help with that NMN. And probably the best one, according to research, is FISSN. And that comes from strawberries and some other things, but you can buy it as a supplement. And then on the other side, for inhibiting NADAs, the enzyme that's breaking down NAD, it's also called CD38, is my favorite one is probably apigenin, and that comes from parsley. And so that's going to keep NAD levels high if you're taking both of those. Quercetin actually works on both. It has really low bioavailability, but you can get a liposomal quercetin. So that's something that I'd recommend. And then my last one that I'd say for mitochondrial health is a really unique antioxidant that is being considered for vitamin status because you don't make it. And what's interesting is that you have a unique transporter system in your body and storage for it. And it's called ergothioneine. It's a trace amino acid that occurs naturally in organ meats, in beans, and mushrooms. And this amino acid literally protects the mitochondria, boosts your immune system. And it's just profound in that we have this transporter system and storage system for it in our body, and yet we don't make it. So our bodies are meant to use it, but we don't make it. So it's something that's, I think, really critical, and we're going to get a lot more research in. But those would be some things that I would do to boost mitochondrial health.
So I know a lot of people, always are trying these different supplements, but as I did the past 8 years, is really not completely, as I already said, change the lifestyle. So are they even effective if they're not going to probably work to their full potential if you're driving yourself like all day long, racing all day long through stressful days and exercising too much and, pushing yourself every day into overdrive? That I'm always curious, like, okay, are these even working for me if I'm not changing my lifestyle, and if people don't change how they're eating, they're just taking these as a Band-Aid almost.
Yeah, there's two schools of thought there. And I get both. Sometimes I hear that, like, if you're not getting the proper sleep and you're not eating well and you're not hydrating, then why take the supplements? I get that. That makes sense that supplements should be supplemental to like really good foundations.
Mm,
But at the same time, if someone's not doing things
yeah.
well, it was me for most of my life, and I was pushing too hard, and I was the wounded entrepreneur, and I was, grinding 80 hours a week, and I was breaking my body down. The supplements and the biohacks were keeping me in the game. They were keeping me alive. I don't even know if I would be alive. So
Yeah.
for me, it kept me in the game. Like is it ideal? No, not at all. Not by any means. It's not ideal, but I think it kept me alive. And it's the reason I don't have a heart attack or haven't died of cancer or something that I probably should have. The way I abused my body and drove so hard and hated myself and all those things, like I'm lucky to be here.
That's true. It's better to take something than have nothing in the tank. It's just a little bit something to keep you going and surviving,
Hmm.
instead of thriving each day, but you're surviving. But the goal is to thrive. So if we want to
Right.
thrive, improve
Yeah.
that process, we want to do it all. But most people aren't always ready to do that. But nutritionally, I think a lot of times, people need to work on that first, as well as supplementation, what they're missing. But, we'll get into lab testing and then into nutrition first. We all, social media, we see, okay, everyone's strict carnivore. And then there's the paleo. And then I love how you address in the book, because it's my same philosophy, is eat real food. And to me, it's like that balances your blood sugar, we burn fat, and to mix it up. And I think so
Mhm.
many people are so rigid that they're just like, this is all I eat, just strict carnivore. I'm like, well, my husband likes to cook, but we are growing our own broccoli in the yard, and do I feel guilty to have some vegetables now? And mix it up. So I think it's important to teach people to experiment. Is the first thing you talk about. The energy formula is experiment. N equals 1. We're all bio individuals. What works for you isn't always going to work for someone else. Have a starting plate. Like you said, the standard keto is 20 grams of carbs a day. But let's talk a little bit about, the experiment summary you go through at the end of the chapter. I really like, just improve our mitochondria, to improve our body to burn fat, the Goldilocks effect of everything. But, what diet should people do? Because everyone's kind of claiming this works best and that works best. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And That's what I discuss in the book. Those are the first two chapters, is that bioindividuality with experiments and kind of understanding yourself better, and working maybe with a functional medicine doctor, getting all those tests, looking at your genetics, those kinds of your blood work. But then too, yeah, all the different diets and what might fit best for you, and just even reading them. Like, the most important thing is, like, does this connect with you and your lifestyle? Will you be consistent with it? Like, don't pick something that's, oh, I can do that for 8 to 12 weeks. Well, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? That's the diet that you should, take. And for me, the most important through line, like you were talking about, you can be like lazy keto. You can be lazy carnivore. You can be lazy vegan. Like, you can have Coca-Cola and gummy bears as a vegan, and you can eat Spam and hot dogs as a carnivore. Like, as neither one's healthy. The through line that's important here should be the whole food.
Mm-hmm.
So getting away from ultra processed food, getting rid of the antibiotics, GMOs, the hormones, the artificial flavors, color sweeteners, the bliss point manipulation in the food, where it just triggers you to have these food gasms where you just want to keep eating and eating and eating, and it overrides satiety. So getting back to whole food, getting away from engineered food, processed food, all that stuff, getting rid of that. Then to me, like, I think that you need to also get rid of sugar, for sure, and almost completely. You really don't need it. And then finding ways to be more active, even if it's just taking a walk after you eat. Like, that's a game changer. Just that 10-minute postprandial stroll lowers blood sugar dramatically
Mm-hmm.
and puts you into that parasympathetic state. Um, and then, like, doing some fasting here and there, some intermittent fasting, like, and so that you can kind of get a control on snacking. You can have a control on caloric consumption, and all of those things. Then I would look at keto, then I would look at carnivore, then I would look at some of these other things. But to me, those are steps that come after these initial ones of, like, again, the solid foundation.
Mm-hmm. I know I do FDN coaching, and now I'm working for Ben Greenfield as a coach for him, coaching his VIP clients. And we do all that. It's like, look at all this data and collect all these clues, look at your genetics and food sensitivity tests and metabolic typing. And really, it's so fun to kind of be a health investigator, to really individualize, personalize the program for what to eat based on all this information. But I think it is that N=1, experiment with yourself, figure out, how do you feel after you eat? Do you feel full and satisfied? Do you have cravings? Do you have a bellyache? Are you having gas? Are you burping? All these different things that people, one, I don't think realize how to feel what they feel or pay attention to how they feel. They've lost that ability to be in touch with their own feelings. And then often they just have no connection of, oh, that's what I just ate. Or it's just think that's my new normal. I'm getting older, and have these excuses, rather than let's adjust and experiment with the foods I just ate and make the choices to give me health and vitality and energy and happiness. It's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So next question is, what lab tests do you like to do? And I know there's labs that we want to ask our doctor to ideally do, so it's covered by insurance, because most are out of pocket from our functional labs. What kind of some things you mentioned in your book? Of course, people need to read the book to understand it all, but what labs should we start with, doctor, and then other ones out of pocket are great to do in your world?
Yeah, barring some, like, disease or dysfunction that's happening right now, like, the most important ones that are kind of that metabolic mitochondrial snapshot of where you're at with potential for disease and pro-aging, et cetera. These three labs are game changers. I feel like would be profound for understanding your health and working with your physician on that. And it's frustrating to me because we're talking about maybe $100 in labs that we could do every 6 months and have a really good understanding of where we're at metabolically,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of aging and disease and all those things, and we're not looking at them. So it's CRP, C-reactive protein for inflammation. it's hemoglobin A1C for blood sugar, and it's oxidized LDL for oxidation. These aren't expensive labs. These aren't complicated labs. You probably heard of them. But CRP, we're only looking at when we have like coronary heart disease already. Hemoglobin A1C, we're only looking at once we're diabetic. We're not looking at pre-diabetes or, even before that. Like, are you trending towards that? Like, we're not looking at those things or what's going on because there's stress in your life. I see that inflammation's up, glycation's up, oxidation's up. What's going Oh, I'm getting a divorce right now, blah, blah, blah. Okay, like let's look at that because that could set you up for a heart attack. That
Mhm.
could set you up for diabetes. That could set you up for these things, and you're not looking at it. Or maybe you should cut back on your training during this stuff, or maybe you should get more sleep or have more nutrition, more calories during this time. These kinds of things. And we're not doing that with whoever we're working with, a functional medicine doctor or, health coach or whatever it is. We're not doing that. And so oxidation with oxidized LDL. And then there's a couple others that I would recommend on top of that if I was to expand it a little bit. I think vitamin D is just so critical
Mhm. Yes.
in terms of health, the immune system, the hormonal cascade. It's a hormone, not just a vitamin. Like it's just so implicated in nearly everything to do with your health. And most people are, I think about 75, 80% of the population is deficient in it. So tracking that, and there's a variety of forms and steps kind of in the body to get to the active form. So, understanding vitamin D would be really important. And then in cardiovascular, by the way, I hate cholesterol. I think it's like one of the worst things that you can look at. The data is horrible. The higher your total cholesterol, the longer you live, flat out. That's what the data shows. So it's really annoying that we look at HDL, LDL, total cholesterol, they're calculated numbers. It's insane. LDL is not the bad cholesterol. There's a low density, there's like a small dense
Mhm.
LDL that is not good for your heart health. But the large fluffy LDL is actually great for your heart health. So a lot of this stuff's misunderstood. If you need to do cholesterol, if a physician's pushing on that, get something called an NMR test or a VAP test where you do a deep dive into what's called the subfractions. All that said, there's one that stands out to me, speaking of cardiovascular health. Like, this one marker is like a really good one to get a snapshot of how your cardiovascular health is doing. It's called LPA, lipoprotein A. So that's like my top five might be that, like hemoglobin A1C, CRP, oxidized LDL, lipoprotein A, and vitamin D. Like, yeah, you can keep going and get like 50 of them, but I'm just saying for like $150, you could like really know where you're at, like in a pretty good snapshot. So
Yeah.
those are some key
Those
labs.
Those are good ones. So next one, metabolic flexibility. And we talk a lot about metabolic efficiency to burn fat, become fat adapted and be fat burning athletes and, individuals in general should be burning fat. But what's some good tips on metabolic flexibility for you to go? Because I know a lot of people, the sub question is carnivore and the fear of eating too much protein to be gluconeogenesis and lose that metabolic flexibility. There's a lot of confusion out there, I think, of how to be fat adapted and too much protein. And then there's people that eat only the grass-fed meat and organs and all that.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to be carnivore and you want something that's well structured, it needs to be more nose to tail. You need to get the
Mhm.
collagen from the connective tissue, from the skin, from the joints, from the ligaments, from the bone marrow, etc. You need to get all the vitamins that are in the organs. Like you can't just eat the muscle meat because that's not being a carnivore. Like, you don't see like a lion just eat like the muscle and then run off. I mean, it's they're eating more nose to tail, and that's where we get that full nutrition. Again, it's similar to a vegan. Like, if they're just eating like, a few things and not eating like a broad, well-structured diet, then they can run into issues of health as well. Doesn't matter whether it's supposed to be the miracle either way of whether it's all plant-based or it's all animal-based. They both can be great. They both can be terrible. It just depends on how you put them together and how they're structured. When it comes to gluconeogenesis and eating too much protein, I do agree that there's a potential for that. But I also think that like when you have fat with the protein, it's going to slow that potential down. And two, I think your body gets really adapted to oxidizing that protein and dealing with it better, using that small amount of glucose that it might convert it to in a healthy way and help you maintain metabolic flexibility if you were carnivore. So it's hard to say. There's going to be a lot of variance from person to person on that, on the gluconeogenesis and protein thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's just diet variability, individual variability, but it's something to be aware of. Like if you were to wear like a CGM and a continual glucose monitor, you could be aware of it. I mean, is protein from a whey protein shake going to be different from like a fatty steak that's fairly high in protein? Yeah, like whey protein is going to like potentially spike, blood glucose a little bit. But because that's like in its purest form, it's fast absorbed, etc. But is it different when you have like the fatty steak that's slowing it down and, you have to break down the tissues and all that stuff? Yeah. Like so it's different. It's not just grams of protein. You got a bunch of grams of protein, it's going to convert into glucose. I mean, this is always the case. It's not that simple.
Yeah, it depends, and it's not always simple. Because I think a lot of times people will read for protein. Dr. Leon was talking on before. I've read a lot of her stuff about that you should have 1 gram per body weight of protein, if whatever goal weight. So you're trying to weigh 150 pounds, that's how much you should have a day. And then having 20 to 30 grams to 40 grams at once, instead of trying to eat a meal and have 90 grams of protein at once. It's better to have it throughout the day. But are you going to just non-meat all day, or have, like you said, like a whey protein shake or bone broth and other things, how it kind of depends and varies your absorption.
Exactly.
So N equals 1 once again. So let's finish up with supplements and tips on how people can become more fat adapted. As you had some good tips on Ben's podcast and tons of information in the book people need to read themselves. But the ketogenic diet supplements, we learn about electrolytes, magnesium, exogenous ketones, MCT, and berberine. What are some of your favorite things that you've come across that are maybe new, up and coming, to really help us up our fat burning and our, talk a lot about the brown fat and what we can do to become efficient fat burners? Because I know, I'll finish with, just exercising all the time, I don't lose weight. So I think there's a lot of people that exercise and go to any race, you realize that people don't all lose weight. A calorie doesn't equal, 3,500 calories doesn't equal a pound, because you'd see a lot of amazing looking athletes, but you don't lose fat weight from exercising by itself.
Right. Yeah, great point. And there's probably 3 that come to mind. So when we talk about glycation, advanced glycation end products, how important it is that elevated blood glucose and elevated insulin chronically can lead to pro-aging, pro-disease, metabolic syndrome, mitochondrial dysfunction, advanced glycation end products, all that stuff, inflammation, dyslipidemia. You want to keep blood glucose and insulin lower. And that's where tracking that hemoglobin A1C helps. And a drug that's been known for years and years and years to be a great glucose disposal agent is metformin. But a study has shown that berberine outperformed metformin head to head. And metformin was shown to be tainted and recalled last year, and it causes a B12 deficiency and some GI distress. And so berberine is superior to it and natural. But there's a new form that I was involved in the patents of called dihydroberberine. Mm-hmm. And that's the metabolite of berberine, the active metabolite. So What's cool is it's about 5 to 10 times more bioavailable, and you can drop the dose from 500 milligrams to 100 milligrams, and it lasts about twice as long in the plasma. So you can, instead of using it 3 times a day, use it about twice a day. And so a much lower dose, doesn't have the B12 issue, doesn't have the GI distress. And it's, to me, the most powerful thing that you can use for anti-aging. And if you're using a glucometer or, a ketone meter or, whatever, like to measure, you'll see how effective it is. I mean, everyone sees how effective berberine or this better form dihydroberberine are, or metformin. So that's the first one I'd look at. Metformin is so potent for anti-aging, by the way. There's a study that's about to start with 3,000 people that the government's funding.
Wow.
So berberine or dihydroberberine for sure. Next up, beta is an exercise mimetic. What's really cool, that means it mimics exercise. So exercise in a bottle. This should be interesting to your crowd. So there's been some drugs in the past, ACAR, AICAR, and then another one called GW50156, also called cardarine. And these have been used as exercise mimetics. But in the body, there's a natural amino acid that occurs when you break down L-valine when you're intensely exercising. It catabolizes into L-beta, which is beta amino isobutyric acid. And this is a signal to the body that intense exercise is happening. And so the body sees this when it's elevated. The more it's elevated in the plasma, the more these exercise adaptations take place. Things like increased BDNF neuroplasticity, like improved bone mineral density, improved muscle hypertrophy and innervation, improved recovery, improved VO2 max, improved fat mass utilization, and brown adipose tissue activation. So really, really a cool compound. I believe that it augments your exercise, and you'll just get more out of every rep and every step. So
That's a good thing.
yeah, that's a good thing. So a lot of research going on in it right now. And then another one that comes to mind is grains of paradise. And it's a spice that's from Africa that's kind of gingery or peppery, and it increases metabolism thermogenesis through brown adipose tissue activation. So brown adipose tissue is not like the rest of your adipose tissue, your white adipose tissue, that fat on your body that you may or may not like, depending on where you're at in your growth process. Um, but the brown adipose tissue is around your neck, mostly around your collarbone, and you only have about 6 to 7 ounces on your body, and it's brown because it's mitochondrial dense. And what it does is, just like cold plunges or cryo, it's going to upregulate number of brown adipose tissue cells and activity of those brown adipose tissue cells. Brown adipose tissue is the fat burning fat. So it's literally like the thermogenic fat. Before we're 6 to 9 months years old as a baby, like we lack the ability to shiver. So we need this brown adipose tissue to give us heat, thermogenesis. And so grains of paradise activates those brown adipose tissue cells, and it's been shown at only 40 milligrams to burn over 100 calories in that one dose. So we don't know what it does at like 80 milligrams, what it does at twice a day or whatever. So it could be interesting that maybe it's burning an extra 400 calories. What does it do over time? Like we're not sure, but more research is going into that as well. And it's one of those things that maybe it has synergy when combined with like cold plunges or cryotherapy, et cetera. So those are some interesting ones that come to mind.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is what I'm finding is the aging athlete, as myself, and suddenly I'm turning 50 this November. And it's like, what can I do to improve my life? And like Ben was talking on his show, when you were on a show about what he's doing for his 40th birthday, I'm trying to figure out what to do for my 50th without that extreme workout that he's doing. But just my goal, and I think for most people, I would hope would want to live their best life, their second half of life. And I want to be my best version of myself I can be and perform my best and not blame the aging process and my hormones and menopause and just getting fatter. That's the thing that happens. And I just want what strategies I can implement in my life that are sustainable to improve that process and to be lean and strong and not have to be, overweight because you're getting older and that's what you look like.
Right. Right.
So it's just great to have those strategies that you share in your book and how to create that energy formula. And I think a lot of it is for those aging individuals to improve that process so you thrive, not try to survive every day and live fully and being in the moment and enjoy that process rather than struggle and just think that's just how life is supposed to be. It drives me nuts.
Agreed. Agreed.
So lastly, what, is your goal in your future as, you have Mr. Formulator? Are you going to create your own line? You've got some supplements you're creating, and what's going to be your future? Your
That's a
future
good.
self.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm enjoying researching new compounds, patenting new things, having some of those branded and doing studies on them and that kind of stuff. I don't know. Like I formulate for other people. I have a company called Zone Halo Research, and I formulate for a lot of big companies, a lot of celebrities. But I don't know if I'll ever come out with my own line. Maybe that would be a conflict of interest. I'm not sure. I've thought about it. Some people have definitely approached me about it, but I enjoy formulating other supplements. And then probably most I enjoy right now is just researching new novel ingredients.
Yeah, that's great. You're always on the cutting edge. So I don't know if you want to answer this, but if you got COVID, did you have your own kind of supplement line that you would get if you were ready for it just because you're traveling and doing things? Do you have your own protocol you do for
Yeah,
yourself?
100%. Yeah. So I would use liposomal vitamin C, higher dose, like up to 5 grams a day. You can't really get above a gram without getting GI distress of regular ascorbic acid. So liposomal is preferred. Zinc, I like the OptiZinc form. You can take 50 to 100 milligrams a day for 2, 3, 4 weeks, but don't stay at that level for too long. That's just too high of a mineral load. Normally you should be like in the 15 to 30 milligram range. AHCC is probably one of my favorite immune system compounds. It comes from mushrooms. It's called active hexose correlated compound. It's expensive, but this stuff brings me back like when I'm plummeting and I feel my body crashing. It works better than anything I've seen. It has great research. Monolaurin, which is from coconut oil. The C12 is antiviral and antibacterial, and been found to bolster the immune system as well. And this is kind of the optimized form of that, and it's called monolaurin. And then I also like the amino acid L-lysine. It's the best at boosting the immune system. It's a ketogenic amino acid, fairly cheap and very available at most drugstores. So those are some ones that come to mind. Obviously, vitamin D3 at 5 to 10,000 IUs a day, depending on your sun exposure. I like to take it with vitamin K2 as well, and in the MK7 form. All of that stuff is covered in the book, but yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. Well, everyone have to get the book. And when does it come out? The launch
Uh,
date to
it-
buy?
Yeah, April 1st, you go to energyformula.com, you get all the bonuses, the fasting for energy guide, the live Q&As, there's a recipe book, there's a hidden chapter on natural ancestral movement, and then you're getting the whole actual book for 99 cents. That's kind of insane through
Yeah.
April.
Crazy.
And yes, you can get a hardcover. That is $39.99, like I said, but it cost me $39.80 to make it. It's full color front to back, with tons of full color diagrams. And I will have an Audible out in a month or two. I finished recording that. It's getting edited, so that'll be out sometime soon. But I love the support. I'm not making any money. I've spent a ton on it. This is
Yeah.
about getting it in people's hands and really having people not go through some of the the hell that I've been through in my life. So that's my goal, is to just help people avoid some of the things I've been through.
That's what I say all the time. Help them avoid going through what I went through. So that's kind of, you've defined your purpose, you're following your passion, and now your mission is this, and being so generous with all your information you share on social media, and really helping people get healthy from the inside and out with the doing the holistic type of way that is not just the exercise nutrition, but working on self-care, and that self-love is so essential to really being healthy. So I appreciate
Mm.
it.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, thank you for having me on. Everyone go to energyformula.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Shawn Wells, ShawnWnwells. And I have a website that has tons of free guides, has cool newsletters, recipes, ShawnWells.com. So you can find me on all those places. And I've been doing Clubhouse, and I'm at biohacking on Clubhouse. So
I just signed up for that yesterday. I'm like, another distraction. I'm not big on all these apps, and I
I
try to stay
agree.
away. I'm like, oh my God.
I love this one. This is probably my favorite because I
Okay.
can really just focus and help people with great information, and not like, it's much different than something like Instagram, I
Yeah, I
promise.
haven't figured it out. I just signed up yesterday because people keep asking me. I'm like, okay. And now I'm like, I have no idea what this even is. I'll have to work on my tutorial. So I think I'll check it out. So I will put all the links in the show notes. So thank you so much for your time today. And we'll look forward to hearing you and following you and your new journey, and keep sharing that great information.
All right. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for having me on.